So start with the title. So Palantir at $1 trillion. Does it need a consumer product? I say no. I mean, you say no. While the idea is fascinating, it's a mere utopia. So you would like to continue? The
Well,
podium
I
is all
start
yours.
from a little premise. There are many things in the dreams of Palantir investors. One is Palantir becoming a $1 trillion company. I think this idea of the 1 trillion was when it first reached the $100 million when it was completely hyped in 2021. And what Carp said was, well, I don't really see why this company shouldn't be 20 times bigger. So combined these two elements with some hype, people started getting super interested in, oh, Palantir 1 trillion, Palantir 1 trillion, Palantir 1 trillion. So there is this in the back of all Palantir investors. But since this is the big dream of seeing officially Palantir becoming a big tech, now there's the acronym Magnificent Seven, we all hope to see Palantir belonging to these acronyms as well. But the way to get that is not clearly homogeneous in the mind of Palantir investors. Especially the conversation gravitated about a question. Does actually Palantir need a consumer product to achieve this 1 trillion question? And this observation, this thought, actually comes from a very grounded reasoning. If we look at the Magnificent Seven, so the biggest seven companies in the world, they all have a B2C, so a consumer component. We see with Amazon, Google, Tesla, Apple, Nvidia. So they all have this consumer component. So does Palantir actually need a consumer component as well in order to reach this $1 trillion market cap? And I provided my answer. In this article, I explicitly said, well, guys, this is a nice utopia, but at the end of the day, it's just an utopia. I don't think Palantir needs a consumer product. And the three simple reasoning I shared was first, Palantir already is the company that tries to solve the most difficult problems. This in the B2B segment, so working with enterprises and with government. I believe these two segments are already difficult enough because Palantir, differently from other companies, are not completely skewed on one side and they just do something on the other side. Palantir literally has two engines that work together. For instance, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they all work with the government somehow, but the government contribution is relatively little. So it is just, let's call it a side job apart from the core business. While for Palantir is definitely the core business, as it is the core business, the commercial side. And the beauty of Palantir is actually trying to make these two core engine actually work together. And that actually happens in the form of R&D. But this to say that what Palantir is doing, trying to be the standard in the government side and also becoming the operating system of enterprises is already difficult enough. So that would, like thinking of a consumer product would be actually a huge distraction, a distraction for which Palantir has never hinted a willingness to pursue. It doesn't have the skill, I would say. And let me say, even after 20 years of actually working with the government and now almost 10 years working with enterprises, we already see that Palantir is not really great yet at selling its product. Imagine this while having the most effective product in the world. So imagine when you actually selling to a consumer, the skill you need to actually understand the consumer is actually a completely different skill set. So even if it would be nice to say, okay, Jarvis, or say, okay, Palantir, tell me what I should eat today, give me a recipe, and maybe even cook for me, that would be lovely. But I don't personally see Palantir doing that. And it is also a detach from their core mission. Their core mission, again, is we want to become the operating system of the modern enterprise, the modern government. This, as a corollary, means that I don't think Palantir will actually develop a consumer product on its own. However, if it is true that Palantir wants to become the operating system of the modern enterprises, I see actually very likely that an external company, let's call it a company that would follow the steps of Apple, let's call it a peer that wants to to build a B2C consumer by leveraging full scale Palantir AAP and all its platform, that could be actually be something that would work to my eyes. Because think of it, what is a personal assistant? A personal assistant is essentially an aggregate of LLM models, LLM agents that work together, but they also combine with the specific need of a consumer. And you also need a company that targets a specific need of a consumer. Palantir so far has worked with consumers, customers of all enterprises, but they are not focused on learning the customers of their customers. They're already thinking just of their customers. For instance, Tyson Food, Palantir doesn't really care of understanding how the psychology of the clients who eat chicken. They just need to focus on Tyson Food. So this is the broad answer I said. For these reasons, I don't think Palantir actually is willing or will do a consumer product which destroys the dream of Palantir achieving $1 trillion with a consumer product. Yet it left the question open on wait a second, what Palantir actually need to do to achieve this $1 trillion market cap? Because if we reason on what is needed to reach this $1 trillion market cap, we could have actually a better understanding on why this idea of a consumer product actually doesn't make sense, or at least it makes little sense. Then again, Palantir is one of those companies that keep a surprise everyone, even people like us who have been studying it very closely every quarter. We try to understand, we discuss. So there is always space for surprise. But let's see how things are for now. Essentially, in order to reach this $1 trillion market cap, there are multiple ways. And the simplest way to think of it is thinking in terms of revenues. We know that the valuation, so the total market cap, is nothing else than uh, revenues amount multiplied by a multiple. So what we call EV sales, price to sales. So 1 trillion is 1,000 billion, and that could be reached on 10x EV sales on $100 billion revenue, or 20x on $50 billion revenue, or something in between, like 15x on $66 billion revenue. So if we say, let's take the most optimistic case. So let's take a very high multiple of 20x sales. Right now we are around 13. So we are very optimistic on getting the least revenues needed to reach this $1 trillion market cap. And we get $15 billion revenue. We still need revenues to 25x the current 2 billion. So this gives a sense of how far this trillion is. And remember, this is a very optimistic case. But okay, let's try to understand. is there any chances Palantir could actually get there in the long run? And I think the biggest hint we have is by looking at the size of the artificial intelligence software market, which was hinted also by Karp in an interview last year that in around 10 years, this market alone will be 1 trillion. So if Palantir is actually able to capture a slice of this market, which is expected to grow at around 23% CAGR, as we mentioned previously, Palantir could reach $50 billion in 12 years under the assumption that it could grow more than this market. So 12 years to grow by growing 30%. That's already very, very optimistic. We have been already optimistic before. 30% CAGR, it is in line with the past, but it is hard to say for 12 years the growth will be this strong. 30% is something that means that essentially every 2 years the revenues double. Potentially possible, maybe it will happen. I hope it will happen, but I would not rely on that. But this to say that if this happens, so Palantir reaches $50 billion in 12 years, Palantir would get only 2% of the total market size by then, because which is what we said is growing by around 23%. So 2% market size of this huge market gives a sense that this market is actually big enough. This is a hint, in my opinion, to say, okay, the market is big enough for Palantir to actually grow to this $50 billion without reinventing completely its own, starting building products for consumers. But let's make one step further. This $50 billion could be achieved into many different ways. And this is actually helpful to have a sense of what it is truly needed to reach these optimistic revenues. And $50 billion revenue could be acquired by a combination of 25K customers paying around $2 million per year, 10K customers paying an average of $5 million per year, or 6K customers paying an average of $8 million per year. I would say these are all ambitious numbers, yet they're not impossible, because in 2020 the average was $8 million. And we have to think of the market, so what we shared previously, as something that is not static but keeps growing. So as the world of software actually increases, Palantir doesn't only get more customers, but the existing customers should theoretically expand more and more. And also by growing, Palantir would have more pricing power so that it can transfer the price increases to the consumers. So you see, these numbers are extremely optimistic, yet they're not impossible. What actually Palantir needs in substance actually to get there? What Dan Eves actually said, the messy of AI. Well, the messy of AI is a simple way to say, in order to truly become dominant, Palantir needs to become the standard for any industry. And potentially it could be, but if Palantir doesn't get a standard, doesn't become a standard, remains a small player, this vision can't be true. So this to say, this $1 trillion is a possibility according to the reasoning we have been done so far. But from here, where Palantir is just scratching the surface, to become the standard of any industry, it is a very, very, very long journey. So far, we have been seeing Palantir becoming the standard, I would say, for aviation with Airbus, we discussed previously, with defense. It is a recognized leader. In healthcare, I would say we are getting there. I can't say we are the standard yet, but certainly the amount of clients, the amount of use cases, the relevance of the clients hint that there is this motion in play of Palantir becoming actually the standard for healthcare. But healthcare is just one sector. And the sector is what brings us to the second angle that I wanted to share, because Palantir differs a lot from the traditional software categorization, which says or you are a vertical software or you are a horizontal software. The difference between the two is the depth and how wide the software is deployed. When we think of Salesforce, we think of a platform that is extremely wide and used by a huge amount of users and sectors. Why? Because essentially the software that is used by Coca-Cola, the Salesforce Coca-Cola uses, is probably very similar to the one used by Airbus. Surely there are some customization, but in the grand scheme of things, it is still the same platform. On the other hand, we could have software like Viva, which is built on Salesforce, which tackles very specific vertical. Viva is Salesforce, but tailored for the healthcare industry. So, two observation: Salesforce is the biggest horizontal software platform and already have $20 billion in revenue and still grows at around 10-20%. This means that horizontal software mainly focus on CRM. They also have Slack. They also have that platform Tableau, and also some other software to make more analytics. But at the end of the day, that is mainly CRM. Still generated $20 billion revenue. 20 billion for one horizontal software. Okay, let's combine with the second component on the vertical businesses. Viva, which is just one sector, one vertical, healthcare, reached $2 billion in revenue. And also here it is growing quite nicely. Now let's make a comparison with Palantir. Palantir doesn't really have an horizontal platform, but it neither is a completely vertical platform. Palantir is something that could be deployed at scale into any industry, but it also has the depth that potentially is required to work into any sector. So it is the combination of an horizontal software platform and a vertical software platform. And Palantir currently operates not in one, not in two, but in 40, more than 40 verticals. And the simple reasoning I shared was if Salesforce can generate a $20 billion by focusing essentially on one simple horizontal platform, and Viva can generate $2 billion only focusing on one vertical, and I would say in one vertical they provide the CRM, which is neither the most sophisticated use case. If we make this simple reasoning of giving Palantir 2 billion from each sector, multiplying by 40 sectors, we reach $80 billion revenue, which is more than enough to potentially reach this famous $1 trillion market cap by having a multiple of around 15 times, because we said previously with a $50 billion revenue, with a 20x multiple, we reach 1 trillion. So this long journey to say, look, the market of AI is big enough so that Palantir could reach that scale and still have a relatively little size of the market. I personally expect Palantir to increase its share in this huge $1 trillion market cap one day. But going deeper, if we make a stricter reasoning on saying, let's take the verticals Palantir currently operates in, and let's assume Palantir becomes the standard of each of these vertical, and as we mentioned previously, we have been seeing Palantir becoming the standard in defense, in the aviation. Probably right now we are in the path of seeing healthcare being transformed, and gradually over time Palantir becomes the standard of each industry. Then this idea of Palantir requiring a consumer product doesn't really make any sense, because all these industries, by working with B2B customers, are already enough to generate potentially enough revenues so that these 50, $80 billion revenues could be generated. Again, this is a very long term ambitious goal. It required more than 10 years, certainly, by growing 30%, which is already very optimistic. And probably most of investors will drop previously. Hopefully, we will not. But this reasoning, in my opinion, says okay, what is a dream for many investors is actually just a mere utopia. It doesn't really make any sense.